Alright, so for right now, just right click and copy that still match folder. And then what you're going to do is on the computers that you're sitting at, has anyone here never used a PC? No? Good. Alright. So on your computer you have a P drive. So you're going to go to your P drive and you're going to create a folder with your last name underscore W18. And then inside that folder, make a new folder called 2560. And then that's where you'll paste that folder is inside that 2560. And then while it's copying, you can open up Photoshop. So all the images that we took pictures of are in a raw format, so they're .nef files. So what that means is that we are allowed to process them, or we should process them before we take them into anything and start doing anything with them. If my white balance was off, if the lighting in here was natural lighting and the lighting in another room was fluorescent lighting, and then the lighting in another room was a different kind of bulb, all of those things go into play. I hate how this does this. Go to preferences. Show startup workspace. I'll try that again. Shop. All right. While we're waiting for my Photoshop to open. This is the aperture that's on a camera. So and this is kind of weird how it does it. The bigger the number, so f22, the smaller the opening. And the smaller the opening means that it needs more light to make that image. Okay, because that's all cameras are, basically just like recording light information. So a small opening, f22, produces a pretty crystal clear image. Not all the time, obviously you could be out of focus, other things could be happening, but you're better off getting a pretty clear image using this. With a smaller number, f2, the opening is much bigger, and so what that does is that causes you to have a very narrow depth of field. So if you look at any images that are like f1.8 photography, this is the kind of stuff that you would typically, that's pretty horrible, like this, okay? Now something like this, we definitely could composite something in the background, but what's the point? It's just blurred out anyway. And the same thing here, it's just blurred out. So this is mainly for doing something where you have a pretty defined image in front and then blurrier stuff in the background in there. Now you could still do it to a point, like you could add something here, we could remove something there, whatever it is, but we typically, for what we're doing, want to shoot with a pretty clear image, and then any blurring we can always add afterwards. Alright, Photoshop didn't even decide to open that time, just closed out. There we go. I can close that. And here. Alright, so what I want to do is just open one image and just see what we have. So I'm just going to drag one image into Photoshop. This should open up the Adobe Camera Raw application, which it does. And then I can see with the quality of the image. So obviously this one is not good. Everything is pretty much blurry in here, except the bag. That bag is the clearest thing. Okay. Inside this, let me just close this and pick a better image. That's a horrible one. Let's grab a different one. Maybe this one will be clearer. Yeah, that's definitely better. Okay, so this one's pretty good. Obviously, we would have to crop it so we don't have the boots in there and we don't have this weird circle, because that's something that is distracting to the image. Inside this Camera Raw application, you can redo the lighting inside here. Now this is important because obviously if you had your camera going from one scene to another scene to another scene, it could totally throw off the color. If one of my images is this yellow and then another one of my images is like that, which is more cool, and then another one is, I think that's only two that's really going to show me. Yeah, that one's pretty good there. This is fluorescent, that's fluorescent. You can see it's pretty white. As shot is a little bit yellow still. Okay, so with a raw shooting format, you can do that. So anytime you do any photography, shoot raw. The shirt that I'm wearing today, I purposely wore it because we were doing this specific thing. This is from Fro Knows Photo. This is a guy on YouTube. He wears this exact, not this exact shirt, but he wears a shirt that says I shoot raw on it, and he always yells at people for not shooting raw. That's hilarious. But you should shoot raw so you can do this kind of stuff. You can adjust colors in JPEGs, you can adjust colors in TIFFs, but not to the same extent that you can do it inside of a raw format. Because what happens is your camera takes a picture, it does a bunch of stuff to it, and then it like bakes it into that image. With the raw, you basically get all the exact stuff that it shot without any corrections. Yes, ma'am.
How do you know the camera is shooting raw?
You have to go into the settings and change it. So any digital SLR should be able to shoot as a raw format. Sometimes it'll say raw JPEG. That's fine because it means it's shooting a raw and a JPEG. You basically just need the raw for what you're going to do. If you have a point and shoot, sometimes those don't have the raw format on there. So you really just have to check your camera to see if it does. Your phone wouldn't. Your phone is just JPEGs or whatever it is. Okay? You can adjust the exposure. You can adjust any of the other properties inside here too. Okay? A lot of this stuff we're just kind of trying to find the best base image for what we're going to be doing with it. You can see we can adjust the shadows. Right, so it knocks it down. Now, any adjustments I do to this image, if I shot another image in that same location and I'm going to be putting something into that thing, or into this zone, I basically have to redo all of those same settings to that image too. So it makes more sense to just do some basic stuff, like not even worry about this yet. Just basically worry about my white balance, and then I can come back later and adjust it on all of the images all at the same time so that they all match together, okay? So this image looks good, so I'm just going to hit open. Okay, so go through the images and find a base image that you want to use. So spend some time looking at your images, adjust them a little bit. I'm going to look through some of the other images and see if there's another shot that maybe I want to use. Obviously, make sure that it's in focus. Right? So I said that we wanted to be aware of grain and everything else inside there. So if I go to this image, I believe it was. Alright, so if I go to this image and I look at this picture on the wall, you can see how grainy it is inside here. Like this entire face is just covered in grain. That's not just pixels, that's grain from the camera itself. If I go to the one that I picked here, you can see it looks much softer. It's not perfect, but it's definitely much softer than the other one was. So you want to get in close and see what the grain is doing, see what the focus is doing. All right, so just to kind of pay attention to just the color changes on each of these. So this one here and this one here, I chose fluorescent in both and didn't change any other settings. And you can see there's a huge difference in just the tones of each one of those. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to use both of these for this shot, but stuff to pay attention to, because as I start adding in these elements, they should look different in each one of these. Okay, so I'm going to use, I think I actually like this view better. This is a little bit more dynamic of a shot. I have other stuff I could add to the scene, so I'm going to use that one. Okay, so we're going to do this in Photoshop. I'll show it, and then I'll show After Effects, and I'll also show how we can bring stuff in 3D and actually bring that into there as well. You don't need to do the 3D part, but I want you to at least see how that functions. Okay. So inside of I just want to verify my perspective on these look like they're going to work. So that should work. Okay. There were, again, a couple different chairs. This chair, I could see the top of it, so I wanted to use that one because I think that I could even put that closer to here so I can see the top of it, versus the other one where you could just see it head on. And if I see it just head on, it basically means that it's going to be, you know, at eye level. So I want to make sure that wherever I use that chair that it is appropriate. So my first step in this is just doing a rough cut. Okay. Because this is in Photoshop and because we have all of our objects in different files, I want to basically just grab the item with the marquee. So I go to the marquee tool, I hit Control C. Okay, that way I'm copying it. I go to where I'm going to be putting it, and then I just Control V to paste it. Okay, so Control C to copy it, Control V to paste it. And I'm just pasting it inside this scene. Before I do any advanced stuff, I want to make sure that it's at least going to fit inside my scene. If I chose the wrong perspective, if I chose whatever, I just want to make sure that that's going to be apparent before I get into the shot. Okay? Now again, I'm kind of looking at the perspective of this. I can see the lid of this. So even if I put that there and made it a big trash can, that still works. That looks like that could be sitting right there. Or if I hit Control T and I shrunk this down and stuck it over here, the perspective still works on that item. Okay, so that specific item works. Now just so you can see what wouldn't work, let me grab one of the other images that I shot with that. Which one is that? Close it. I want to close it. I just wanted to open that. Control C to copy that one, and Control V to paste it. Alright, so now the perspective on this one, you can tell, is already like way off. Like, why is it at such a weird angle? If you ever have a guess or a doubt whether it's going to work or not, you can always just draw lines inside of Photoshop or wherever to see if it's going to work. So using my pen tool, and I'm going to set this to shape. I'm going to set the fill to none and the stroke to a red. And we'll make this 5 pixels. Okay. So if I go here and I draw out this line, this is basically my perspective line. So if you remember stuff from illustration class, why isn't that working? I don't have the direct select. There we go. From illustration fundamentals class, then everything should have this perspective that would go back to it. Because we have, let me hide these. Because we have these lines on the floor, we could also use those as ways to figure out if this is indeed a perspective matched item. So I'm just using my A key. Why isn't that? This is like that tiny. That's just not showing up. It's on top, yes. try that again. So we'll go to the pen tool. I'm in shape. I'm in stroke. Yeah, I get something. No, it just doesn't like me duplicating it. Oh, whatever. All right. So what I'm doing is just kind of drawing out these lines so I can see how the perspective of this room is working. Now you may see that there's actually some distortion in here. If I click a point here and I click a point there, this beam, I'm positive, should be vertically straight. And what we're going to see is that it's actually not vertically straight in the image. Every camera has some lens distortion that is on it. So that's something that we have to consider. In Photoshop, they have some undistort tools, but they don't have anything specific for undistorting a lens. After Effects, we'll see, does have some undistorting lens stuff in there. Okay. Oh, sorry, it's not there. It's over here. Lens correction. Oops, not that. I want to go to that one. Lens correction. There we go. Okay. So if we click on that background image and we go to Filter, Lens Correction, this is where knowing the model of the camera helps. Oops. And the lens that I shot that one with was a 2.8. Oh, I should have had that info in there already. I don't know why I didn't grab it. Yeah, that's it right there, 2.8. Oh, huh. There we go. I'm just going to click on that top one. That's it. So that top 60mm 2.8 ultra macro lens. That seems like that's it. And then turning that geometric distortion off. That seems to be what's fixing it. Oops. Or not. Nope. I've never used the one in Photoshop. I've used the one in After Effects before. So yeah, that looks like it's right there. I can also, should be able to just go to Custom and then put this in here. Now let me see if this has Move Grid, Straighten Tool. There we go. So there is a Straighten tool, so if I click here, let me see if this works the same way. Oops. Cancel that. I'm go back to this, back to Lens Correction, back to the Straighten tool. And then I'm just clicking and dragging, and what that should do is just allow me to straighten this out. So you can kind of see what this is looking like. That looks like it's pretty straight there. That looks sufficient. Now I should be able to come to Custom and also play with this here. So removing the distortion, or adding more distortion in the opposite direction. So if I reset this to 0, there it is. That should be exactly where we left off. Going this way, we're adding more distortion. Then going the other way should be removing it. So I'm going to go to a +1. And if you look at that line now, that line is pretty straight with what it was. Okay? Photoshop apparently has a very limited feature set as far as what that tool can do. So if I can click on this line and scoot that over, there we go. So that's pretty straight, okay? So going to the filter, going to lens correction on this, going to custom and then just setting that to a +1. that should correct your lens. Every lens is going to be different. Every camera is going to be different. You really have to play with it. If I had a GoPro or a fisheye lens, you would really see some crazy distortion inside that. Okay, so now I can go back to my pen tool and just start drawing some lines in here, there to there. Alright, I'm just throwing those out there just so we can see this. And now I grab my trash can. These lines should essentially be lined up with where the trash can is. And you can see that the perspective of this is just, it's like way off with that lip. Now it's not just rotating it, like it's like really far off. I'm sorry, that was the wrong one, wasn't it? Yeah. There we go. So now as I come up, what should happen is this is like lined up with the ground. As it comes up, these lines should be more even, because as we move up towards the top of this, where'd my other one go? There it is. As we move up in the world closer here to here, these lines are gradually going to be becoming more vertical. So there's a part that's like from the back is pointing up, from the back is pointing down. On this trash can, they're pretty well in the center where that would work. In this trash can, they're pretty much still pointing down. Those perspective lines still go too far down and they're too far out of where that's at. We could try rotating it, but you'll see that the lines are just not going to work in this shot for that specific one. This one would work for that perspective. So again, just something you have to look at while you're adding or matching stuff up. Alright, so I got my recycle bin in there. I'll grab Amanda's picture, paste her in here. I'll grab the metal chair, paste that in there. It's like a weird collage. Oops. And the green chair, remember I said it's too blurry, it's not going to work, so I'm not going to use that. Now sometimes you're actually going to spend time putting something into your scene and it just won't work and you just have to suck it up. The scene would look better without having that item in there. If I hit Control T on any one of these items, I can shrink it down. Now before I do any of that shrinking down, I want to convert each one of these to a smart object. So I'm going to right click and do Convert to Smart Object. Okay, and you right click right on the name and then convert it. Inside of Nuke, all of that would be automatic. We can scale something down super tiny and then 2 seconds later bring it back up and it maintains all of that stuff. It does not destroy any of our pixels. So now I can go to my trash can or my recycle bin and shrink it down and kind of get it placed where I'm going to put it. So let's say right there. Now, if the perspective doesn't match 100%, we still can tweak things. I can still go in there and distort it a little bit just to kind of move some of the points around to change some of the perspective. We just don't want to go crazy from the one that was really off to that one. And obviously, scale is an important thing, making sure that Amanda doesn't look like a giant. Right now, standing back here, she would look like a giant because she'd be touching that. So, and that's too tiny. That looks good. Good enough for now, at least. Alright, so now I have Amanda in the scene, I have the chair, and then I have the recycle bin. So now what I'm going to do is I'll start with the, actually I'll start with Amanda here. Okay. So to cut Amanda out, she's not on anything, any crazy colored background where it would just allow us just to extract that information out. We really have to go into this and use, let's say, the pen tool to cut all of that out, or use one of our other tools. So if I hit P to get to the pen tool, I make sure that my settings are set to path, and I simply go around. I'm going to turn my show pixel grid off, and I just kind of outline Amanda here. Then we are good. She's cropped out, and then we can extract her from her background. Okay. So you thought the pen tool was gone. It's not gone. We will still use it inside Nuke. It's just going to be called a different tool. All right, now once you have the pen tool all the way around completed, you should get a path inside of your paths. Then you can just double click it, give it a name, and then you can control click it and then create a layer mask with that. Make sure you're on the correct layer. There we go. Alright, so once you have the mask on there, now we don't want to actually delete anything because we still have some edges that are in there. So it's very, let me duplicate this so you can see why I don't want to do that. So I'm going to delete the layer mask. I'm going to control click this, and then I'm going to just delete. Oops, make this back to a regular object and delete that. So if I delete the pixels that are out there, I lose all that information. Now typically we don't need it, but let's say I accidentally erased too much stuff here and now that looks horrible. I can never bring that back. Okay, so I'm going to just delete that layer. You always want to just control click the path, go to the layer, and then make a layer mask, and that will basically just cut her out. And then we get more options to tweak what she's looking like. So if I double click the layer mask, this will bring up the properties for the layer mask, and then we can go to select and mask. And what this allows me to do is then further refine what this mask is looking like. Because you can see I wasn't perfect. I still have some edges around here that need some work. So if I go to select and mask, there's my original image. I go to the view and I say on layers, and now I can see what this looks like. Oops. Then I can go to edge detection and I can pull this up. And what that will do is, in some cases, not every case, in this case it's not doing a good job, but sometimes it will do a very good job of picking up exactly where that edge is. If I click on Smart Radius, it'll do a little bit more refined job. I can also play with the contrast of the mask. I can also shift the edge. Oh my god, I lost your leg. Alright, get rid of that. Get rid of this radius. We don't want to lose our actress here. So I'm just going to shift the edge some. I am going to do a little bit of a feather. Not a lot, but a little bit. And you can see already, just by adjusting that feather. Come on. There it is. By adjusting that feather, I'm able to eliminate all those edges pretty much that looked bad. Now, don't pay attention too much to the fact that she still looks like she's incredibly cut out. We still have to adjust colors, and we still have to adjust like reflections and whatever else. It's a very stalkery kind of picture too. She's standing there in the middle. Okay, so you have to play with these controls. The edge detection, they didn't work in this image. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. You can smooth things out, see what that's going to do on the specific image. In this case, I feathered it a little bit, I took the contrast up, and I shifted the edge, and then that seemed to be enough to extract her correctly so that she is nice and refined on this background. Cool. You're good. Okay, so that cleans up the mask that was inside there, and then what we can do is we can tweak what her colors look like and what she looks like, because she's, if you look again at the blurriness of this and you look at the blurriness of her, if you look at the blacks of the scene and you look at the blacks in her shirt and her outfit, she definitely looks different. The grain in this image does not match the grain in that image, and so that's stuff that we have to really look at and tweak. Okay, for now, don't worry about it. For now, just worry about going to these items and cutting them out. Now, when I go to the recycle bin, this is a different kind of situation. I could use the pen tool and just outline it again and cut that out. That's not a huge deal. But we did shoot this on a green screen, so we should be able to pull that out a little bit different than the other stuff. So if I find out which layer this is on, which is on layer 1, and I will name this recycle. And this is Amanda. And that is chair. Okay. So if I go to the recycle bin and I go to select color range, this allows me to pick a color and then zoom in on that color. Okay, so control the fuzziness. So I can't really see it in this image. I don't know why it does that. I can't change that. Selection preview, black matte. There we go. Oh, inverted. There we go. So I want to invert it. So I change this to a white matte or black matte, doesn't matter. And then I inverted it. And then I can control the fuzziness to get rid of that green. Because that's what I'm after, is just getting rid of all that green that's in the shot. So then I hit OK once I've kind of figured that out. This creates a selection. Once I have a selection, I'm going to invert it, Control-Shift-I. and then make a layer mask of that. Whoops, I did not need to invert it. Apparently it was already inverted. There we go. So now that helps just cut it out. Now for the bottom of this, there is no way to obviously just color select that. For that, I may need to use the pen tool. Just quickly though, I can just use a Polygon Lasso because that's pretty straight. Oops, too far. There we go. So I selected that, and I'm just going to go to the recycle bin and just fill that with black. So I hold the control key and then I tap the backspace, and that fills that with black. So now that recycle bin is also cut out, and the perspective isn't right on this. You can see that this angle does not look correct. I will fix that as well. When we get to the chair, I think this one is going to be basically pen tool just cutting out this entire thing. I'm not going to do that today. I'll just hide that for now. Okay, cool. Alright, so let's play with some other stuff so that we can tweak it. The cool thing about Nuke is because it has nodes, nothing is ever really destroyed. So when I start distorting something here and then I decide I don't like it, I can always erase that and go back to it. Photoshop kind of is getting into that. They have, because this is a smart object, I believe I can go here to distort, space pinch. Nope, they don't have the one I want. Every software like Photoshop and After Effects and obviously Nuke have different ones that you can use. They do not have the one that I want, so I will have to convert this. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to hide the one, and then I'm going to rasterize this one. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can hit Control T and then hold the Control key down and then reshape what this is looking like. There we go. Why weren't you doing that a second ago? There it goes. I had to apply the layer mask for whatever reason. I don't remember having to do that before. There we go. So now I just hit Control T. I hold the Control key down. It allows me to re-distort this a little bit. Some little smudges or little movements is perfectly fine. I don't want to go crazy with this. I can't take this and go down like that and change the entire perspective of it. But I can just kind of nudge it so that it looks a little bit more appropriate into the scene. Okay, so that works for that one. I think Amanda was perspective enough that she was right there. Cool. All right, so now what I want to do is I need to adjust this. It looks like, oops. Yep, it looks like there's probably a little bit of green screen still spilling over. If you look right here and I hide that, you can see there's a little bit of green screen coming in. So I'm just going to go with my eraser in this case because I've erased my mask and I'm just erasing that green screen. And this is, as you start building stuff, the bigger you make it. So if this was like something that's going to end up at a movie theater on a screen, you obviously want to make sure that it looks really clean up close. There we go. Alright, that's good. I need to adjust the colors. So there's ways up here where if I go to image adjustment, I can play with all these color things. What that's going to do though is it's going to destroy my ability to come back and edit it. So you always want to come down here and add these color adjustments. Okay, so if I'm adjusting this color to match that background, I'm going to make sure I'm clicked on the recycle bin. I'm going to go down here, and in this case I'm just going to use a exposure should do it. Okay. Now I don't want to adjust this yet. Right now this is going to affect everything underneath it, so including the background. I want to hold Alt, click between these layers, and now I get this. And so this should affect only that recycle bin. Okay. Before, let me just pull this off so we don't have to keep doing that. Before, if I hold Alt and click there, it affects the entire image. Holding Alt between these, it only affects the recycle bin. So what I can do here is just kind of play with these until I get something that is, a bit closer. And the way we test it is just kind of click this on and off and see, are we getting closer to where that's at. Okay, now part of this is going to be the color, so I want the color to match. The other part is going to be the sharpness. So these table legs, if you look at them, are pretty soft and blended into that background. This is pretty like popping out. Okay, so I think I adjusted maybe the color a bit too much. Let's pull that exposure back down some. Yeah, that's definitely a better color. And then I'm going to go to this image, I'm going to go to blur, and I'm just going to put a Gaussian blur on this. Now again, this is one of those things, perfect. It's one of those things that Nuke does very well because it has a whole list of blurs that we can adjust and use. Always check the before and after, always look at the stuff around it, see if it's matching the area. Right, so like obviously that's too blurry. That might be pretty good there. Now this is where if we needed to adjust that, I have to undo that blur because the blur is just gone now. I can't take the blur away. Okay. So that looks like it's blurry enough with what the pixels are around it. Okay. Now I can do the same things to Amanda over here. If I click on Amanda, I can copy this exposure. So I just hold Alt and drag it up, and then Alt click between them. Yeah, that looks pretty good with just that default exposure on. I may want to also add a levels in here. Up there you do, yeah. I can pull the, oops, let me Alt click between these, there we go. I can pull that output black out, and now you can actually see it. Now up here and on my screen, you're seeing two different things. So just trust that when I'm playing with it on here, that it looks better than it does there. Okay, so that looks pretty good like that. Okay, now again, I look at the blurriness. If you look at these edges right here, you can see how blurry these pixels are. And you can see Amanda is pixelated, but she's definitely not blurry. She's clear, especially the I Love New York. That is also clear. So I will go to this. I will duplicate it so that I don't ruin the original. Let me hide the bottom one. I'm going to rasterize it. I'm going to apply the layer mask. And then I'm going to Gaussian blur. So let's start at 0.9 and just see what that looks like. Okay, we want to, again, keep in mind what we're viewing it from. We're going to be about back here. Yep, that's... Yep, I think at 0.9 is maybe too much. So let's go a little bit less than that. 0.45. Yeah, that should be good there. Cool. So that works. Alright, so now what I need to do is I need to create this grain pattern. Now obviously I'm going pretty quick here because I want you to see it. You can definitely play with this after and mess around with it. In order to get the grain pattern on here, in Photoshop they have one thing which is just called add noise. They don't have like a list of things. After Effects has a list of things. You can go to grain and you can say, I'm going to pick this grain, and it actually chooses different kinds of film grain that you can add to your stuff. Photoshop is just add noise. So we're going to just make do in Photoshop with add noise. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to fill the layer, and then I'm just going to say add noise. And that looks great. Wait a minute. Yep. Oh, I picked green. That's why. Like, why did I try green? I'm going to go to add noise again. You have to fill it with something, and then you can do like monochromatic if you want gray, which is perfect. I only want it to affect the recycle bin, so I'm going to hold down Alt again and just click right there. And you'll see that this only affects the recycle bin layer because I've Alt clicked. And set that to, let's say, screen, and then let's take the opacity down. There we go. So now we have some noise on this. This is definitely not perfect. I think I want to also blur that noise too. That looks pretty good. If I look at, you can kind of see it. There's noise right in this area, noise right in that area. They both look like they're very similar. So now that recycle bin is looking closer to actually being locked into that spot. I'm going to ignore Amanda for a minute and then just do the rest of this recycle bin. Okay, so we cut it out. There's still a smidge of green right here that is just bothering me. Go there. That. Now I don't want to just use the eraser tool on this or delete it. It will actually give me a hard edge there. If you don't believe me, there's a hard edge. That's way too hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feather this. Now again, in software like After Effects, software like Nuke, we have the other tools that allow us... Oh, way too much. Way too much. There we go. That works. Okay, we have tools that allow us to edit the stuff after the fact. Okay, so that's working. I'm going to go under this layer. I'm going to make a new layer. Yeah, I guess I'll use the Polygon Lasso. Alright, so I need to create some sort of shadow down here so that it looks like I have some sort of contact with the ground. You can see what this one looks like. You can see what that one looks like. That one's a little bit darker. So I want to make sure that I have that under there too. So I'm going to go to Select, Modify, Feather. Make this 10 should be good. And then just fill that with black. And you can see just that one fill really kind of locks it in there. If I add too much, obviously that looks horrible, so you don't want to add too much. Just one little bit right there is good enough. Alright, and then the last thing I want to do to this recycle bin is put it into the reflection. So I'm going to go to the recycle bin. I'm going to duplicate it. Oops. Actually, I'm going to take this whole group here, group that together, and duplicate that. Yes. And that goes below it. I hit Control T. Alright, it grabs the whole layer. I don't want to grab the whole layer. I just want to grab right there. Control T. For real. Alright, I'm just going to grab this and then just do that to it. Now I think I have to use a different tool for this. So I'm going to pull this down. Oops, not that one. I'm going to go to this one, pull it down. Oh my god. I'm just going to lock all these layers. Oh, because it's auto-selecting. I don't want to auto-select. That's why. There we go. So I'm pulling that down there. I'm going to flip it like that. Right. And now what I need to do to match this up, let me turn this one back on, is I need to be able to push these edges here and push those edges there. So under Edit, Transform, there are several different distorting tools. So one of them is Skew, Distort, Perspective, and Warp. So if I go to Distort, this basically gets me back to what I had before, so that's not really going to do it. I could do this in stages, where I just do this. I grab this side, I hit Control-T, and then drag that up. And then I grab the other side, hit Control-T, and then drag that up. So that's definitely an option. I only really need the colors of this. I don't care what this does on the bottom. This is going to be like knocked out. So I'm going to take this and just add a layer mask. Make sure this is big. Make sure this opacity is down some. Oh, make sure this is soft. There we go. And then looking at how far the metal legs here come out, it's not very far. I mean, the blue is pretty bright, so it's going to come maybe a little bit further. Like that. That seems like it's good. And then I'm just going to set this to be a screen. No. Overlay. That seems to work good. And then take the opacity down on it just a bit. A bit, I said. Alright, now the color of that still isn't right. I'm not, it seems like it's like maybe too blue or something. Alright, so I'm going to go to this one. I'm going to go to my adjustment layers. Oh, it's probably on my exposure still. There it is. Yep, that seems to be better. Alright, so now we've added, simple as that was, right? Now we've added a little bin right there. And all of this is the recycle bin. Now, what's cool about when we get into Nuke and we start doing this is that whole setup that we've done where we've added grain and color corrections and all this stuff, we can duplicate that entire thing and just change what item we're doing. So instead of recycle bin, I could just drop Amanda in there and it would do all those same things to Amanda. If I had the chair, it would do all those same things to the chair, and then I could just jump through and modify it. This is where Photoshop really lacks the abilities that Nuke has in that fact, okay? Because now if I wanted to do any of that to Amanda, I have to go back there and do all that stuff to Amanda. It's obviously a huge thing, just that small recycle bin, holy cow. Now, because we did it to one recycle bin, I could duplicate this thing. Yes. And then I could scoot it over here, and I can hit Control-T and shrink it down. Not that much. I think I shrunk it probably too much. There we go. So now I have a second one in there, so it's not a huge deal to, you know, duplicate that. That one's too big. If this was, come on the ground like it should be, and let's say that it was even over further, like that, this is a great opportunity for us to help weld this thing into the scene more, because what happens is we can start integrating it into our shots. So if I hide that for a second, I come in here with the pen tool, And what I'm doing is just outlining the parts of this where the that recycle bin wouldn't be showing. I don't really care about that. Yep, so I'm only caring about these areas here. Alright, so that's part of it. I'd fill this in too with something. Let me set this to a subtract. Alright, that should be good. Alright, that one's an add. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to turn this one back on. I'm going to duplicate my background layer, drag it on top of this, and then just do a mask on there. So now this is a bit more believable because now it's incorporated into our scene. Obviously I have some issues with the edges. I can just double click this, go to that selected mask, make sure I'm on layers. Maybe the radius would work here. Nope. Maybe smart radius would work. Nope. Then we just go into smooth maybe. Maybe we shift the edge some. That'll work. And I think I accidentally cut off the bottom of this. Maybe I didn't. Oops. Nope, I did. So I'm just going to go into this and then just use my paintbrush. No, I didn't cut it off. It's right where it should be. Alright, so that's my bin is too low. That's what that's telling me. So I need to go to my recycle bin and push it up some. There we go. So again, another way to kind of incorporate that into the scene. If this was something here I wanted to get rid of, I would use a clone stamp that out. If your Photoshop skills are a bit rusty, you may want to take the weekend and start playing with Photoshop, because as we start getting into Nuke, we will use Photoshop as a tool that we're kind of bouncing between, because some things are easier to do in Photoshop than they are in Nuke. Like if I wanted to clone stamp this light switch out, that's easier to do inside here, because I can literally just go like this and then say edit, oops, make sure I'm clicked on the right area, say edit, delete content aware, whatever that thing is called. Content aware scale? No. Fill. There it is. And then content aware. And just that easy, I can take it off. In Nuke, we actually have to use the rubber stamp and just literally paint the thing out. And then if this is an animation, we would have to go frame by frame and paint out the animation frame by frame in there. And that would obviously be a lot easier. Same thing back here if we wanted to drop this in. If we had special text we wanted to add in here, it's easier to do inside Photoshop than it is inside Nuke. Definitely possible. Obviously more editable. Sorta, kinda. There are certain things that we can do, depending on how the camera moves, where we can get rid of it in one frame, and then basically we lock in this portion of the frame so that's always moving. So you remember your serial we did in After Effects, same thing. We could just erase it in one frame and just use that as the frame that moves around. Okay. Alright, so I'm just going to save this. This is my Photoshop still match. Okay, if we went into After Effects and we wanted to remove this stuff, we would do a very similar process. We use the pen tool to cut out some items. We would use the green screen keyer that After Effects has to pull out the key from that recycle bin. Again, the only difference with After Effects would be that all of the stuff in After Effects is all layered. So then we can just duplicate it and then adjust what those properties are. So instead of doing it to just a recycle bin, we could just duplicate it and do the same thing to Amanda. So all of our noise and all of our reflections and all of our other stuff, those properties we can duplicate and assign to that. Okay. So if you want, you can take the rest of class and just play with this in Photoshop and just see if you can get one of the items or two of the items to look like they're welded into the scene. Okay?